All right, welcome back to CS with Jack, and welcome back to the series where we're going through the book, the C programming language. Today, we're going to be talking about input and output in C and running through some of the exercises from the book. So if you have it, follow along. Otherwise, just watch the video and I hope you learned something. We're going to be specifically talking about the operations getchar, where we read a character from input, and putchar, which prints a character from input. So they go hand in hand together in input and output. Now we're going to define our standard input output library as always, and then we're going to write our main function and get into it. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is declare a variable of type char and name it C. Then we're going to print out, enter a character to prompt the user for input. And that input using getchar is going to be assigned to our variable C. Next, we're going to write you entered, colon, and then we're going to use putchar with C in parentheses to output this input. So essentially what this is doing is taking input and then just putting it right back out. Very basic function, but key to the foundations of input output. So we're going to compile this in the terminal and let's see what we get. So as you can see, when I put in an A, it prints right out an A. So now let's change this to an integer C, and then we're going to delete the bulk of this function and input a while loop. Inside this while loop, we're going to write that C is equal to getchar, so exactly what we saw before. But now we're going to have a condition where it's not equal to EOF, and we'll get to this later. And as long as this while loop is running, we will output the character. So essentially, it's just an ongoing loop of outputting exactly what we input. And as you can see in the terminal, when we write something, the program just gives it right back to us. So this is working, and this is just another example of continuous input-output. Now you might be wondering what EOF is. EOF stands for end of file, and in this case, we're essentially using it to tell when we're at the end of the given input. EOF is actually just an integer, and to demonstrate this, we'll print it out using a printf statement. And as you can see in the terminal, the value of EOF is actually just -1, which essentially gives a false value to the while loop and terminates the process. All right, now that we've covered EOF, let's go back up and delete that print statement and move on to our next exercise, which is going to be a function that does character counting. First, we're going to define a variable count. We're going to set it to a long. And in a while loop, we're going to write getchar is not equal to EOF, which we just learned about. So we're checking for the end of the input. And as long as the input is still continuing, we're going to increment the count variable using our plus plus that we learned about in the last video. Finally, we're going to do our printf statement to write down the total characters using our long integer specifier. And we will go down into the terminal, compile this, and then we're just going to give it a sentence like hello world. And you'll see when we do Control D, that terminates the process, and we find that we get the total number of characters, which is in this case is 14. So this is a successful function. Now let's go up and change this to line counter. We're going to change the long variable into two integers, C and lines. We're going to change the contents of the while loop back to that original C equals getchar is not equal to EOF. And then we're going to alter the inside of the while loop to be a conditional, where we check if C is equal to a new line. If it is, we're going to increment lines. Finally, we're going to change the print statement to write total lines and then change the format specifier to match what we have and get rid of that extraneous parenthesis up top. Let's compile this and give it another sentence with some lines. Hello world, my name is Jack. And then we'll terminate, and as we can see, it says total lines is 2, which is correct. Now we're going to take it a step further and do a word counter for our final exercise. We're going to start by defining a couple of macros underneath the standard input-output library. We're going to say in is 1, which tells us when we're inside a word, and out is 0, and that tells us when we're outside of a word. This will help us keep track of where we are in the input. Now let's change our specification of the function, call it word counter, and then we're going to assume that all words are separated by a few different things, including spaces, tabs, and new lines. Now let's get rid of the code from last exercise and write two integers, c and state, and set them equal to out, aka 0, as well as words, which is equal to 0. In the while loop, we're going to say that c is equal to getchar, and this will continue as long as it is not equal to EOF as usual. And inside, we'll have another conditional where it checks for spaces or new lines or tabs. The two vertical lines serve as or statements, which means that this conditional will be triggered as long as any of those three statements are correct. If it is triggered, the state changes to out, meaning we are outside of a word. If it doesn't trigger, we'll drop down to the else if statement, where we'll check the state. If the state is out, we will transition it back to in, meaning we are now inside of a new word, and we will increment the total number of words. Finally, we'll create our printf statement, go down into the terminal to compile this, and we'll write hello world and see what this gives us. As you can see, we get 2 total words indicating that our function is working properly. Let's try it again with a different input just to make sure that this is working correctly. I'll say, hi, my name is Jack, and I love C. Works correctly, and there you have it. If you learned anything today or enjoyed watching this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I'm excited to keep diving into this book in the coming weeks, and I hope you'll join me for the journey. See you next time.